Hello. So, I'm not used to giving talks. I've given one for this. It was exciting. You guys might have been there. It was nice, but I'm used to giving presentations on camera because that's my job. So, when you're on stage, you're meant to pretend everyone's naked. I'm not going to do that. When you're on camera, you're meant to flirt with the camera. So, what's up? Hey. So, my name is Kate. It's not on the slide because I didn't think it was important, but I'm going to talk to you about something that interests me so much that I spent 3 years getting a degree in it. Classics. In particular, stories, specifically ancient epic, even more specifically, the Odyssey. Yeah. Nice! I like you. You're clicking too early. Okay, so I only have 2 hands. So what I'm going to do is sort of, I'll do that. Go. But not yet. We're getting there. Wait, go back one. I don't have a gesture for that. Okay. And how it relates to The Legend of Zelda, which you guys all know. Because apparently, you have to talk about video games to stand up here, but whatever, let's get into it. Okay. So there's this really old story, back before the invention of writing, and it's kind of hard to imagine a time before writing, so I like to picture it, go, and again, yeah, as one of those times where they had to have one of those, like, traveller's books for, like, lazy tourists, where you just point to a thing and go, toilets, and everybody kind of understands you, because pictures are universal, and that they just learnt to recognise their favourite biscuits by the packaging rather than the name. That's what the ancient world was like, guys. So this story is called the Odyssey. It's by a guy called Homer, but not that Homer. The other Homer, who looks sort of surprised and slightly upset. You might have heard of the Odyssey, and that's cool because I'm going to be talking about it a lot for the next 15 minutes or so. So prepare to be knowledged. So, you probably know the story of the Iliad, which is also by Homer. Yes, this is working great. It's the one where Brad Pitt took his top off and killed a load of people. But it's also the story that features Odysseus for the first time. That's Odysseus. He looks a lot like Homer, but that's just because they're both carved out of stone. But in the film, the one where Brad Pitt takes his top off, he's played by Sean Bean, which isn't important to the talk, but it's still lovely. And he's the one who came up with that whole let's hide inside a big horse idea. So we like him. But when the war ended, he had to go back home. And that's where the Odyssey comes in. Or, as I like to call it, the Iliad 2, the Returnening. And if Homer had any sense, he'd have called it that as well. It's the tale of Odysseus going from Troy to Ithaca, as you can see on there. Oh, getting a bit ahead of yourself, but now you know what happens, spoilers. Troy's the one on the right there, and Ithaca's slightly more to the left. You look at that and you're like, 10 years, that took him 10 years. Well, he didn't have planes. That's a joke I took out, but apparently I've put it back in. But it took him 10 years because, click 3 times. Yeah, nice. He kept stopping off to have loads of snogs along the way. Those are all different women that he had a bit of a fling with. One of them for 7 years. As it turns out, the Odyssey, or at least the Traveller's Tale, is so well trod today that we can actually see echoes of it even in video games. I'll put that in a more clickbaity way. Pow! The Legend of Zelda is basically a story from nearly 3,000 years ago. If it was on BuzzFeed, it'd be called that. No one would read it, but that's fine. There are some obvious and fun parallels. Pow. I'm sorry for the sound effects, I'm enjoying that. All the sailing. Yeah, sailing. And again. Sorry. Accidentally hitting on princesses, that's Odysseus in that one. And that's Ruto, who he accidentally proposes to in The Legend of Zelda. Don't get them mixed up. The importance of having monsters have weak spots, in particular eyes. In the Odyssey, he stabs a Cyclops in the eye. Where else are you going to stab him, really? And in Zelda, everything has big glowing eyes because biology is terrible in that world. And, of course, the idea of having a faithful, patient woman waiting for you at the end of the day. Ah, that's nice. That's Penelope. And that's Zelda. You know Zelda. She's that one. So there are some really interesting themes that appear in both. apart from all of those I've just said. And those are the ones I'm going to talk about in a bit more depth. So the key themes of the Odyssey are as follows. Nostos, Xenia, and Kleos. I've done them in Greek, so I look smarter than I am. But there you go. We're going to talk about those. So first of all, Nostos is this particularly Greek idea of homecoming. That's what it translates to. And it's a word you can see in things like nostalgia, which is literally nostos plus algos. So it's like the pain of returning home. Bit of a weird translation because you don't really get pain when you think of the 90s, but you know. The Odyssey is big on nostos because it's kind of the point of the entire story. He's going home. Odysseus' devotion to his nostos is demonstrated by his absolute determination to return home, despite finding paradise. Ah, lovely, with lots of hot women and fruit. That's all they had in those days. He's got 3 hot ladies that all kind of want to marry him, or at the very least bone him for ages. And even being offered immortality at one point, he refuses them all, because the point is that while these choices might be better, they're not home, which is Ithaca. It looks like that. It's boring. I have to turn the page. Whoa! Okay. So the Legend of Zelda is similarly big on homecoming, just in a different way. The only reason Link leaves home in games like... See if I can remember what games they are. Link to the Past. Twilight Princess. And Wind Waker. Could have just looked at this. But no. Is that something super bad happens? And suddenly home, that looks like that, isn't home anymore. So it's not really a case of going from A to B. It's about turning B back into A, and thus returning to the way things were before. It's home as the state of the world, not a literal place. On top of that, Link faces so many temptations along the way, not necessarily hot ladies that want to bone him, but he could stay as a child forever. Like that. There we go. Just to demonstrate that's what he looks like. And he could be playing mini-games for ages. That's the best mini-game. And you'll know why. Click. That's why. Who's played Wind Waker? Make the noise. But he won't save the world if he does that, and he won't get to go home. And this involves you guys as the player. It's perfectly possible to play the game that way, but you don't get the sense of completion. You don't have to finish the job you set out to do, so you'll never go home. But what is home? It's somewhere comforting, somewhere you can go to after hours of work and throw down the baggage of the day. It's somewhere you can relax because you've worked hard to get there. And Nostos is the end game. It's somewhere that you can relax. Only once you see those words on the screen, you know you're there, you're home. So you put in all that work. Good job, guys. But the second is Xenia. Yeah. Which roughly translated, because we don't really have a concept of what this is in modern times, it's guest friendship. It's weird. It's basically this really cool thing that ancient folk and some modern civilizations do, where they treat any guest in their home like royalty. You give them food, you give them drink, shelter, gifts, and an unspoken contract to definitely not kill and rob them while they're sleeping. It's nice. It's basically couch surfing for the pre-couch era. But that doesn't translate quite as nicely. So Odysseus, through his travels, uses and abuses this right. He wounds, he robs, and he lies to his hosts. But Xenia is governed by Zeus. He's like the big dog in Olympus. So whenever anybody is a douchebag to the people who are hosting them, they kind of get, divine punishment. And that's what happens to Odysseus. That's why he takes so long to return home. Serves you right. Don't piss off the gods, guys. Duh. In The Legend of Zelda, Xenia is a bit different. Almost all of the doors in the lands Link explores are open, allowing him to not only enter their home, but also to smash all their pots. In this lovely GIF I found. Imagine it's playing, and imagine Link walks in. And he picks up all the pots, right? Oh, it's gripping stuff. And then he throws them on the floor, and there's money inside. You guys know that bit. There's also houses you can steal from their chests, and you can milk their cows. It's basically Xenia, not really by choice. But the only house that complains about this intrusion is in Wind Waker. So there's a guy who lives in this house. It's called the House of Wealth. And if Link picks up his pots, he actually tells him off. And he goes, "You're going to have to pay for that." But in a less nice way. But what happens to that guy? That he gets poor. Kind of the same. I mean, it's not divine punishment. His daughter gets kidnapped, but I like to think it's divine punishment. So Xenia, it's important. It's more than just a warrior princess. Ahaha. No, don't groan. So next there's Kleos. Yeah. Kleos means eternal glory. And in a world where everyone's doomed to death, cheerful, it's the only way to get immortality. Because it's the only way that people know about you after you're gone is your reputation. So to Greek heroes, this means you've got to do great deeds. Because you're only going to be remembered if you did something cool in life. And the greatest deeds is honor in battle. Achilles died for eternal glory. He was given a choice. He chose that one. And he thus became immortal in the words and poems of writers. Odysseus has to return home to make sure that he doesn't die a completely lame death at sea. And also because his son's waiting at home, and his son's reputation depends on his dad. If his dad's rubbish, he's rubbish, and no one ever sleeps with him again. But when it comes to Link and video games, Kleos can get a bit mucky. So for one, Link isn't even the hero of his own story. It's called The Legend of Zelda. See, look how big that is. She does nothing. But how does someone starring in someone else's legend get eternal glory? 3 ways. You might have to do quite a few clicks to get to those 3 ways. That's all right, I've got to turn the page anyway. Destiny, inheritance, storytelling. That's my voiceover voice. You're welcome. So it's Link's destiny to be the boy in the green cap. This is going to be 5 clicks. He's forced into the role of the hero because he was born into it, which brings me to the second way, inheritance. It's hinted at in a couple of the games that the role of the hero could be a hereditary or a reincarnated position. I don't want to get into like canon stuff because it's horrible where the Legend of Zelda is concerned, but let's just trust me on that point. And Kleos is something determined by the success and reputation of your ancestors. So Link, whether he knows it or not, is reaping the rewards sown by previous Links, those ones, in his line. The third way is storytelling. That's all right. It's cool. Well, spoilers, you guys know what happens. I mentioned that poets and writers are the people who carry on your story after you've gone. And this is still true today, but in a different format. Now you can go. There we go. The Legend of Zelda franchise is still going strong, and it's such a huge part of gaming culture that I don't really see it dying anytime soon. So it's not exactly that poets are, singing the praises of Link. It's more just that we're buying his crap. But it works in what I'm trying to tell you. But Link isn't really the typical Greek hero. For one, he's far too chaste. And dying in battle isn't really an option in a game designed to be beaten. But it's the humanity he shares with our boy Odysseus that makes him such a compelling hero. Those 3 Greek heroic values that I talked about are all about extremes of basic human values. Nostos, the desire to return home, is how we all feel after a long, hard day at work or a bus journey in the rain or even a nice holiday. It's how Bilbo feels in The Hobbit. There we go. He writes a story about returning home. He goes on a big adventure and he comes back and he's like, oh, thank God. Puts his slippers on. At least that's what I got from it. And it's also how Arya feels in Game of Thrones. And it's also how the fluffy dogs in Homeward Bound feel. But I forgot to get a picture of those. Just think of fluffy dogs for a second. Yeah. We all just want to go back to what's comforting and recognizable in ours. Xenia, hospitality, comes from the fact that we need to trust our fellow humans and that we want to believe everyone's good and kind and won't shank us when we're not looking. Trusting all you guys. Think of the houses in Pokemon where people give you free gifts when you just talk to them and they heal your Pokemon for free and they're generally really nice and actually really helps you in your game because you're a 10-year-old. And also there's loads of fairy tales that are all about generosity and they're kind of twee, but that's all right as well. That's because Xenia is about demonstrating selflessness, and selflessness should be rewarded. It's a good human value. And all Kleos has ever been Even for the Greeks, even for us, is the desire to live on after death, to cheat mortality, for our lives to have meant something more than a brief blip of biology. Glory-seeking can be found, again, in games like Pokemon, because it's all like, oh, I want to be the very best, like no one ever was. And what they're really saying is, I want to live forever. And in a more real sense, literally any game that has a leaderboard is about leaving your mark long after you're dead, or after you've grown up anyway. The Greeks refined these human desires into huge heroic things, and they told tales of monsters and men and gods to embody them. Our narrative tradition isn't books and scrolls and minstrels anymore, it's video games. And for the first time in human history, we live the lives and the legends ourselves. Whoa. At the end of the day, these tropes are there in both the Odyssey and the Legend of Zelda, and many, many other forms of entertainment, because they give the heroes a drive, a reason to win, and they're relatable enough for us that we can share in their journey. Even though stories like the Legend of Zelda are told through pixels and screens rather than papyrus and ink, we're still sharing the same tales, told through the same values. Go. And again. Yeah. We may have changed the way we tell them, but our stories still have humanity at their heart. Thank you.